So the first phase of music first phase of the Beatles lyrics that I kind of wanted to concentrate on was the very beginning. And just a quick piece of background information, the Beatles consisted of four young men, John Lennon, Paul McCartney, George Harrison, and Ringo Starr, who were these young musicians about to take the world of music by storm. And from the start of their career, their songs were all about love. In fact, the first three albums all dealt with love or heartbreak. And their big inspiration was Elvis, was this kind of rock and roll, simple love. The first two songs that brought them success were Love Me Do and Please Please Me. And they realized that in order to continue this success, they must cater to like this younger audience. They were smart. They had to cater to a younger audience, which consisted of a teen, mostly female fan base. And the two main writers of the band were Paul McCartney and John Lennon, who wrote as a team at the beginning. They were young and they were looking to make music that just sounded good, and their music kind of reflected this sort of innocence that Simple can see on their take on love. And they had to establish themselves, so sticking to this universal emotions such as love was the quickest bet for them to become these objects of fascination to a young audience before them. And they both agreed, and there's an interview that I'll attach if you click, that they wanted their music to be personal, so that the audience could connect with every song. So they used pronouns such as me and you. It was almost like this kind of simple love story that anyone could place themselves in, and it was between the audience and the band. And these lyrics were simple, the subject matter even more so, which allowed them to pump out more and more songs. And this set the precedent, to kind of look at inspiration behind this. This set a precedent to a lot of how like a lot of boy bands are today. If you look at a lot of the younger boy bands starting out, if you take a look at One Direction, you can see a lot of similarities between the love songs that the Beatles had put out and their beginning love songs, with just a very simple kind of love story that this younger audience can relate to and kind of place themselves so to establish that relationship with the band. The first song that I wanted to just point out was I Want to Hold Your Hand. You can see how simple it is, just about holding hands. It's about this young love, this very innocent type of love. Another hit, Twist and Shout. And basically, if you even just looked at all the lyrics or listened to this whole song, you see it's just very much a like simple repeated pattern, but it's fun, it's upbeat, it's not too heavy or deep. It's just a fun dance song in a way. But as the band started developing, you can kind of see this switch that was occurring in the third album. And by the third album, which is Hard Day's Night, though they were still writing about love, you can just start to see how the lyricism and how the writing style started to shift into what it would be kind of become in the latter part of their career. They started seeing love in a little bit more of a complex manner, and in one of their songs, If I Fell, the lyrics actually responded to the kind of simple subject matter that I Want to Hold Your Hand gave, which is because I've been in love before and I found that love was more than just holding hands. So it's kind of a answer to how they used to write love. And love has more facets than just this simple boy likes girl. This was one of the first true ballads which would be perfected in their career. And this song in particular contains a more mellow instrumental background to emphasize the lyrics instead of using upbeat rock to make up for the simplicity of the lyrics. With another song from the same album, Can't Buy Me Love, this kind of sets the stage again for the latter love songs. There's still love, but now it's being dealt and dealing with more complex issues like materialism. It's not this simple story anymore, and you can kind of start to see how their lyrics were kind of evolutionizing. So then came the experimental phase from 1965 to 1967, and this is when the lyrics started to develop along with the Beatles. And from 1965 to 1967, these years represented some of the most creative and most significant output from the group, with albums like Help, Rubber Soul, Revolver, and Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Heart Band. And I'm kind of taking a look behind the influence and how it changed, and a lot of their influences changed from Elvis to Bob Dylan. And then songs during this period were more complex and dealt with a greater variety of topics than just romantic love. A study even showed how the songs started to become more negative in tone and more psychologically distant, and the amount of self-referencing that they used significantly dropped. And to kind of take another look behind it, Lennon and McCartney were starting to become more independent in terms of their writing style, which kind of caused this rift and this change in the lyrics. Lennon's writing style was typically higher negative emotion, and he also used higher cognitive mechanism words, which suggests that he was reflecting and trying to make sense of events. Meanwhile, McCartney was less concerned with living in the moment and reflected more upon that collective orientation. So you can kind of see these two forces battling within the lyrics and within the songs. And during this time, they stopped live performances completely, instead focusing on songs that could be written just to be listened to by each person, devoting all their time in the studio to develop these more complex themes. And this is kind of a revolutionary take on music, because typically songs are made to be performed, songs are made to sell when you're at a concert venue, but they were no longer doing this for touring. The songs were to be made unplayable to live audience because they wanted to be able to explore that more creative side of songwriting. And the album helped kind of represent this turn for the more negative side of songwriting, distant, and it was more distant and melancholic with more of an intellectual side to the lyrics. And then songs were less focused on being about personal relationships between the band and the fans and more on the observations of others. And some examples that I have listed are Get Back and Lady Madonna. And this is a pretty big deal because they're one of these big bands that have changed what songs are supposed to be like and what they're supposed to sound like when they're produced by bands. They were able to kind of start that transition, start that switch that a lot of bands kind of followed suit. And through these lyrics, you can kind of see more of this introspective style of lyricism, which they kind of made popular. Love was no longer just like this simple love. Love was now being mixed with statements of peace and harmony. And there was this sort of freedom with their experimentation behind the lyrics. And that to take a look at that kind of started with their use of psychedelics. And you can kind of see that with Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds and Tomorrow Never Know. And through this lyrical evolution, they were able to take their like British invasion pop boy band almost to an introspective folk rock and then to this heady psychedelia. There seemed to be no end to their experimentation with the different kind of lyrics. Now they were dealing with subjects like sleep, drugs, even taxes. And they were able to change the way people viewed love songs. Now love was mixed with spirituality and could be broken apart to different emotions. And through this experimentation, they were able to make again popular that different types of lyricism kind of change the course of music, where you could be exploring these different avenues of self and different avenues that a lot of artists didn't really venture into. And then I kind of want to include a side again with these lyrics. And if you were to bounce between the two slides that have the earlier lyrics and now, you can kind of see how through experimentation, through taking a step back from performing live from crowds, they were able to develop these complex lyrics which kind of made waves for the rest of the music industry. If you just look at, for instance, this lyric, when I find myself in times of trouble, Mother Mary comes to me, speaking words of wisdom, let it be. And in my hour of darkness, she is standing right in front of me, speaking words of wisdom, let it be. This is completely different from a song like Twist and Shout, or a song where they're just talking about holding someone's hand. This is a song about introspection and like introspective point of view and introspective kind of perspective and looking beyond just like the simple lyrics that were kind of made popular through their music. And they were able to kind of transform with the audience and kind of give the audience a new take on music and make that kind of music more popular. You just look at the rest of the lyrics and just see how much they experimented. It's just an amazing change to kind of witness through the history of music. And this new kind of experimentation and this kind of freedom with their lyrics that was started by the Beatles or at least just made popular by the Beatles would have a lasting impact for generations to come. Like, for instance, artists like Queen and artists like Billy Joel, who are often known as some of the best artists, some of the best bands, even bands such as like One Direction, even today, they all credit they all can find influence from the Beatles. And even Pink Floyd, Roger Waters said, "But I learned from John Lennon, Paul McCartney, and George Harrison that it was okay for us to write about our lives and what we felt and to express ourselves, that we could be free artists and there was a value in that freedom." And there was. And that's why I kind of thought it was important just to kind of document and kind of understand the reasons why they were changing and why there were so many different types of experimentation with the Beatles lyrics, is because it's so important to today's musical history and just music in general. They were able to discover and make popular and set the path for so many artists today. And I think it's just an interesting to take a look at their evolution.